She looked me dead in the eye, wineglass in hand, and said it like it was gospel. "If you don't like my friends, that's your problem." No flinch. No hesitation. Just cold indifference. And in that split second, the weight of the entire night came crashing down on me. The laughter, the side glances, the snide little digs. All of it. I had walked into that dinner party thinking I was meeting my girlfriend's inner circle. I left realizing I was the entertainment, the joke, the punching bag. But this moment right here, when she shrugged off my humiliation like it was a you problem, that's when I knew. I wasn't just embarrassed, I was alone. But instead of arguing, I smiled. Steady. Because she was right, if it was my problem, then it was mine to fix. And what I did next, it didn't just fix the problem. It flipped the entire script. All it took was one screenshot, and a message that detonated everything. She called it a little dinner with the people who matter most to me. That should have been my first red flag. But I was too blinded by the idea of being accepted, finally folded into the world she came from. I dressed to impress. Fresh haircut, clean shoes, even picked out a bottle of wine that cost more than I was comfortable spending. I wanted this to go well. I wanted to belong. But the second we walked into her friend's loft, I could feel it, the shift in the air. Like I just stepped into a lion's den wearing a "Bite Me" sign. They were polite at first. Smiles, hugs, surface-level questions. But it didn't take long for the claws to come out. One guy made a joke about my job, something stupid like, "So, do you even wear pants working from home?" Everyone laughed. I chuckled too, awkwardly. Then another girl asked if I always talked so proper, or if I was just putting on a show for them. The others started giggling. A minute later, someone made fun of my shoes. Apparently, they weren't designer enough. It wasn't playful. It was surgical. Precise. Like they'd coordinated the takedown in advance. But what really crushed me wasn't just the insults. It was the way she acted like it was all fine. Laughing along. No defense. No, "Hey, cut it out." She let it happen. Every jab, every mockery. And I sat there, sipping my wine, pretending I didn't feel the burn. But deep down, something was breaking. And none of them even noticed. Because to them, I was never a person that night. I was the evening's punchline. I remember sitting there, frozen mid-sentence, my voice trailing off into the sound of their laughter. I had just been explaining something I was genuinely excited about, a project I'd poured weeks into, and somehow that became another opportunity for them to turn me into a joke. One of her friends repeated what I said in a whiny, cartoonish voice, and the rest of the table erupted like I was some court jester on cue. My face flushed. I laughed it off, weakly, pretending like I was in on it. But inside, I was crumbling. So I did what anyone would do in that moment. I looked at her. Not for anything dramatic. I wasn't expecting her to stand up and start shouting. I just wanted something. A look. A hand on my arm. A quiet, "Hey, that's enough." Just a signal that I wasn't completely alone at this table of wolves. That maybe, just maybe, my girlfriend would be my safe place in a room full of strangers who clearly didn't respect me. But instead, she laughed. Not a nervous, conflicted laugh. Not the kind you give when you're uncomfortable but don't know how to stop it. No. She threw her head back and laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all night. Like I really was the punchline and this was all just good fun. She even clinked glasses with the guy who mocked me. That laugh. It cut deeper than any insult that night. Because in that one moment, I realized I wasn't just alone. I was disposable. And she had no problem letting me know it. I sat on the edge of her bed, heart pounding but voice steady. She was brushing her hair like everything was normal, like the evening hadn't left a bruise on my pride. I waited until she paused, glanced at me in the mirror, and I said, "Can we talk about tonight?" She sighed, not out of concern, but like she was already annoyed. "What now?" she asked, dragging the brush through a knot like it was my fault it was there. I told her I didn't like how her friends treated me. That it wasn't just playful teasing, it felt targeted, cruel. That I was trying to make a good impression and they turned me into a joke. And the part that hurt the most? She sat there and laughed along with them. She didn't defend me. Not once. Her eyes didn't soften. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't even pretend to understand. Instead, she dropped the line that would change everything. "If you don't like my friends," she said, twisting the brush through her hair, "that's your problem." It hit harder than all the laughter at that dinner table. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a declaration. A line drawn in the sand. I wasn't her partner in that moment. I was a burden. A problem. Something she had to manage, not care for. And I just stared at her, realizing that no explanation I gave would matter. No amount of honesty or vulnerability would move her. She had already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. So I nodded. Just once. And quietly replied, "Fair enough." That night, I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her to explain herself or try to make her feel guilty. I just went silent. Cold. Detached. It was like a switch flipped inside me. Something broke, and in its place, something colder settled in. She thought she'd shut down a complaint, but what she actually did was wake up a version of me she had never met before. I moved around the apartment like a ghost, saying as little as possible. She didn't notice at first. She was too busy humming some song from dinner, scrolling through her phone, probably still laughing at the night like it had been a raging success. Meanwhile, I was mentally checking out. Not just from the night, but from her. I wasn't planning a fight. I was preparing an exit. A clean one. One that wouldn't leave me looking bitter or broken. One that would show her exactly who she chose to ignore, and why that was the worst mistake she could have made. While she curled up beside me in bed like nothing had happened, I just stared at the ceiling, every second sharpening my resolve. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted justice. The kind that's quiet, surgical, and unforgettable. If she thought I was going to stay silent and stew in that humiliation, she didn't know who I really was. Not yet. But she would. I thought maybe I'd find a few shallow jokes, something I could roll my eyes at and move on from. But what I found in that group chat wasn't just mean, it was straight-up evil. The kind of cruelty that doesn't come from boredom or teasing. It came from somewhere darker. And the worst part? She wasn't just tolerating it. She was leading it. Message after message, screenshot after screenshot, I kept seeing my life, the parts one had trusted her with, turned into material for their entertainment. They had dissected me like I was some reality show character to be judged and mocked. My hopes, my insecurities, even my childhood trauma, it was all fair game for them. They called me Budget Bae, turned a voice note of me talking about my startup idea into a meme, and tore apart a photo of me shopping for groceries like it was comedy gold. And every time I thought, maybe she didn't laugh at this one, I'd scroll a little further and there it was, her reaction. "Leo, I can't with him," or worse, her sending it herself. This wasn't passive silence. This was performance. She was using me for clout among people who didn't even deserve to know my name. That's when the feeling changed. No more hurt. No more wondering what I did wrong. All that was left was a cold certainty. I wasn't the problem. I was the target. And now, I was done playing it quiet. I didn't sit there scheming like some movie villain, rubbing my hands together in the dark. Revenge wasn't something I plotted. It was something that came to me as naturally as breathing. When you're hurt that deeply, when someone turns your trust into a punchline, there's a moment where everything just clicks. No rage, no panic, just clarity. That's what I felt staring at her phone, scrolling through message after message of her betrayal. It wasn't a question of if I'd do something. It was how. I didn't want to scream at her, or throw her phone at the wall. That would have made me look unstable. I didn't want to confront her with a dramatic speech and demand an apology. She wouldn't mean it. No, I wanted her to experience something different. Not noise. Not chaos. Just silence, followed by collapse. I wanted her to wake up and realize the fortress she built out of fake loyalty and backhanded compliments had crumbled overnight. So I moved quietly. I picked the screenshots carefully, like I was choosing surgical tools. I didn't want gossip. I wanted impact. A truth bomb, perfectly packaged, impossible to defend against. I wasn't trying to ruin her life. I was just handing it back to her without the mask. Letting her friends see exactly who they were praising all this time. And when I hit send and walked away, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice. I knew I had one shot. One message. Not to vent, not to beg, not to explain, but to detonate. I wasn't interested in drama. I didn't want to spark a back and forth or leave a trail they could use to paint me as bitter or jealous. I wanted the kind of truth that didn't need volume, the kind that shattered glass in silence. So I crafted it carefully. I selected just 4 screenshots, not the worst ones, not everything I had, just enough to crack the image she'd built with her so-called ride-or-die crew. One where she laughed at her best friend's new hair and called it a clown wig. Another where she made fun of someone's breakup and shared a meme using their crying selfie. One more where she insulted the girl she always posted with heart emojis, calling her a jealous parasite. And finally, the one where she mocked me, said I was just a temporary distraction. Then I wrote the message. No threats. No blame. If this is how she talks about people she loves, I figured you should see how she talks about all of you. You deserve the truth more than I deserved the lies. And I dropped it. No name. No follow-up. I hit send, closed the app, and slipped her phone back onto the nightstand. The moment that message landed, the impact was instant, like I'd pulled the pin on a grenade and walked away before the blast. And what made it beautiful was that they didn't even know it was me. To them, it looked like she got careless. Like the mask slipped. I didn't need to stick around for the explosion. I'd already lit the match, and I was gone. I hadn't even made it back to the bed before her phone started buzzing like a hive under attack. 1 notification. Then 3. Then 10. Then a full-on tidal wave. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my own phone, watching the screen light up like a warning signal. Her world was burning down before she even opened her eyes. Messages flew in rapid fire, angry voice notes, cryptic emojis, screenshots being thrown back at her with disbelief and rage. One friend immediately left the group chat. Another sent a furious string of question marks. And then the biggest shock of all, her so-called sister dropped a message that hit harder than anything I could have ever said. Asterisk, you said you weren't even serious about him. And you've been talking behind MY back this whole time? Don't ever speak to me again. Asterisk. They were unraveling on their own. Turning on her faster than wild dogs when the meat runs out. She had built this circle, made it her safety net, her stage, her applause, and now it was turning into a courtroom, and she was the one on trial. The irony. They had no idea I was the one who'd handed them the evidence. No clue where it came from. To them, it was her fault. Her betrayal. Her mistake. And that was the masterpiece, not the revenge itself, but the fact that she never even saw it coming. The group chat she once ruled had become her execution chamber. And all I had to do was watch. She woke up slowly, like it was just another peaceful morning. Yawned. Stretched. Reached over for her phone without even looking. But the moment her screen lit up, everything changed. She froze mid-motion, eyes locked on the flood of notifications. Her sleepy haze vanished instantly, replaced by a look of growing panic. One message after another popped up, messages from people she thought were loyal, turning cold, sharp, unforgiving. She sat up in bed, scrolling fast, her eyes darting, her fingers trembling. Her jaw dropped as she read the screenshots, her own words staring back at her, now used as weapons by the very people she used to gossip with. Her best friend had already left the group. 2 others blocked her. Someone posted a story with the words asterisk, some people aren't fake, they're just rehearsed. Asterisk. She blinked, mouth slightly open, trying to piece together how everything collapsed so fast. What the hell? She whispered to herself. Her hands were shaking now. Her face drained of color. I watched her from the couch, quiet, composed, sipping my coffee like it was any other morning. She didn't even notice me at first. Her entire world was falling apart in her hands, and she had no idea where it started. Then she finally looked at me, eyes wide, confused, desperate, and asked, "Did you see any of this?" I just met her gaze and calmly said, "Yeah. Looks like your friends had a lot to say." She still hadn't realized the truth. That I wasn't just a witness to the chaos. I was the spark that lit the fire. She didn't break down right away. At first, she just sat there frozen, clutching her phone like it might give her answers, or maybe reverse time. But when the weight of it all finally hit her, it hit hard. The panic gave way to tears, big, fast, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. She wasn't crying quietly into a pillow. She was pacing the room, hands tangled in her hair, breathing like someone drowning. She kept muttering, "This isn't fair. They're turning on me. They don't even know the full story." She tried calling them, one by one. No one answered. A couple of her texts went straight to read and stayed there. Her fingers moved faster, desperate to explain, to fix, to regain control. But it was useless. Every word she'd ever used to make herself look cool, to fit in, to keep up her image, it was now burning her from the inside out. And I just watched, silent. Then she turned to me, red-eyed, smeared mascara, voice cracking. "Please," she said, "can you just tell them it was a joke? That I didn't mean all of it?" She looked at me like I was her last hope. Like maybe I could patch the holes in her sinking ship. But I knew something she didn't. Those tears weren't for me. Not for what she did to us. She wasn't mourning the relationship. She was mourning her reputation. The friendships. The image. The control. She was crying because for the first time, her lies had consequences, and no one was jumping in to save her. And I wasn't about to either. She scrambled. Tried everything. "It was just venting," she said in one message. "You know how we all talk sometimes," she pleaded in another. She started sending paragraphs, long, frantic explanations, trying to rewrite the narrative before it was too late. She even blamed the alcohol. "We were all drunk, remember? It wasn't that serious." But her words hit like stones thrown into a storm, swallowed, ignored, dismissed. One by one, her friends backed away. The replies were cold, brutal. A few ghosted her entirely. One girl replied with a single line, "Funny how people change when they think no one's watching." Another just sent back a screenshot of her own words. The one where she called them fake, two-faced, and disposable. There was no explaining that away. She even tried to guilt-trip them. "I thought we were closer than this. You're really just gonna cut me off." But it didn't work. The group that once laughed at her jokes, that gossiped in sync with her, that toasted to ride-or-die loyalty, they didn't believe her anymore. Because now they saw the real her. And I didn't have to lift a finger. Her lies did all the damage. Her own mouth was the match. I just showed them the fire. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything or slam the door. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting match, no final insult hurled like a dagger. I just stood there, calm, centered, and done. She was sobbing, mascara streaking down her cheeks, hands clutching at the air like she could grab onto the version of her life that had already slipped away. She begged, pleaded, asked me to stay so we could talk it through. But there was nothing left to say. I looked around one last time, at the apartment we used to share moments in, at the girl who once made me feel safe. But all of it had turned cold. Like the warmth I'd imagined was never real to begin with. She kept whispering my name, like that would be enough. But it wasn't. Not anymore. I grabbed my jacket, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway without looking back. The silence between us was louder than any scream. She had handed me that silence when she chose not to speak up for me. Now it belonged to her. Let her sit in it. Let her live in it. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to gloat. I just needed peace. And walking away, quietly, completely, was how I got it. She stood there in the doorway, broken, breathless, looking like a stranger who had just realized she was never in control to begin with. Her lips trembled as she tried to form one last plea, but I cut through the silence with the only sentence that still needed to be said. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You said it was my problem, so I solved it." That was it. No dramatic goodbye. No lecture. Just her own words, returned like a mirror. I watched her face crumble as the weight of that sentence sank in. It wasn't anger in my voice, just clarity. A calm, cutting truth that told her everything she needed to know. She had orchestrated her own downfall, and all I did was let the truth speak. She didn't chase me. She didn't scream. She just stood frozen, phone buzzing with notifications behind her, the smell of burnt bridges thick in the air. I turned, walked down the hall, and didn't look back. Because that last sentence, that was the full stop at the end of everything. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard from her. No texts. No calls. No pop-ups from her side of the world. Just absence. The girl who once flaunted her perfect circle had suddenly gone dark on every platform. Her once busy group chat? Dead. Her Instagram feed? Wiped clean. Mutual friends started reaching out, not to ask about me, but to say they couldn't believe who she really was. One even thanked me for exposing the monster behind the mask. Word spread faster than wildfire. Screenshots circulated, stories twisted, but the core truth remained untouched. She had played everyone, and they finally saw it. One by one, her friendships dried up like a well she never thought would run out. That empire she built on curated selfies, brunch invites, and fake loyalty, it collapsed overnight. And me? I never said a word. I didn't defend myself. Didn't point fingers. Didn't claim credit. She destroyed herself. All I did was hold up the mirror. And now, in that cold, lonely silence she once left me in, she had to live with it, every day. Not just the loss of me, but the realization that her throne was built on sand. And the tide had finally come in. For the longest time, I was the joke, the budget bae, the awkward outsider, the guy they thought they could laugh at and forget. I sat through the mockery, swallowed every insult, and let them believe I was harmless. Weak. A pushover. But jokes have a way of flipping when the punchline learns to hit back. Not with noise, not with drama, but with silence sharp enough to sever ties. In the end, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even gloat. I just walked away and let the truth speak for itself. They thought I was the joke. Until I wasn't. Until the day the clown took off the makeup, dropped the curtain, and left the whole circus burning behind him.